It's time to eat.
What are you hungry for?
Sit down and get ready to consume an abundance of fantasy football knowledge from Ross Tucker and John Daigle.
Feed me now. I'm starving.
On the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast.
Yeah, let's eat, baby. This is the Fantasy Feast Eatin' podcast presented by DraftKings. The crown is yours. You know this voice, at least most of you do. Ross Tucker, former NFL offensive lineman, 5 teams, 7 years, long time ago. But thankfully, it enabled me to get the broadcasting gigs for CBS and Westwood One and start this podcast network, which has been a true blessing. Certainly, we got the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, for those of you who like to bet, college draft, if you're into college football or the NFL draft or betting on college football. This is the Fantasy Feast podcast. Always have my co-host, John Daigle, who does an unbelievable job for Establish the Run. Make sure you use the code FEAST to get 20% off their terrific website over at EstablishTheRun.com. He's at NotJDaigle. I'm at Ross Tucker, NFL. We can follow all the shows on social media at Ross Tucker Pod. And of course, we get more and more people checking us out on YouTube every week. YouTube.com/Ross Tucker NFL. We have a guest today. We don't do this very often. It's usually just me and John. But there are different times of years where we like to bring on some guests. And I'm a huge fan of this guy for multiple reasons. Have been for a long time. Number one, we grew up near each other. He's from Pottsville, Pennsylvania, home of Yuengling Brewery, Yuengling Lager. I grew up on that. Probably not allowed to say publicly how old I was when I first started drinking that, but safe to say it was before 21, but that's okay. I'm 46 now, I can say that. But he's also a treasure trove of information. I mean, I follow Mike on social media because he does a terrific job getting the information about starting offensive lines around the league and new play callers, which is why we brought him on today. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with him. He's Mike Clay from ESPN, does a terrific job, been there for a long time at this point. You can check him out on social media, making sure I got the right one for Twitter. I think it's Mike Clay NFL, at Mike Clay NFL. Oh, he's also a girl dad like I am, which is awesome. Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's quite the introduction, and a lot of things you were doing as well. You know, I thought I was busy just grinding through all that stuff you just laid out, but sounds like you're busier than I. I don't know how you do it, but you know, we're keeping ourselves occupied, much like another former person from our area, Taylor Swift, too. You know, it's just, you know, we're just born with it in that area. You know, we just work hard and grind through.
Well, I think the only thing we all three have in common is we're all trying to avoid a real job as long as we possibly can.
Correct.
I don't know. We're off to a pretty good start. I don't think I'm going to have to get one. She's definitely not going to have to get one. And, Mike, I don't think you are either. So let's dive into it, Mike, because you are the best I am aware of, and I'm sure there's others out there that do it, but I've just been following you for a long time. You do a terrific job of tracking the projected starters on the offensive line, which is helpful for me. But then the offensive play callers and trying to dive into, you know, what that means, what the read should be in terms of them. I don't know that maybe you have, and I haven't seen it yet. If you've posted the new play callers, I don't know, what do you call those that you post?
Cheat sheet.
I always save them on my phone.
Yeah, cheat sheet. Yeah, so I just track them throughout the offseason because I used to look for that stuff. You know, wait, who did they hire as their play caller, or their offensive coordinator, so GM, whatever it may be. So as news comes in, I just keep track. And I used to keep it internally, and then I thought, why not just post updates on social so folks like yourself can reference it? So that's what I do. And yeah, I did it this year as well, and it's a grind until it's done. Once it's done and we have all the answers, because there's always like reports this guy might go there, or there was the Kyle Shanahan, Clay Kubiak drama this year where he promoted him, but it was an illegal promotion and all that stuff. So, but yeah, it's out there on social, and obviously the implications of those hires are injected into our projections and rankings.
All right, so let's start with this. And I know John and I are going to go back and forth, but how many new play callers, and maybe you know off the top of your head, maybe you don't, how many new play callers are there this year, Mike?
There are 12 new play callers. Some of them head coaches, some of them offensive coordinators, but 12, so about a third of the league.
Got it. All right. Go ahead, John.
I want to start with asking about Clay's top-down view of the Jets, because a lot of the players, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Justin Fields, are in key spots in terms of home league tiers, and that it could go either way. Breece Hall is that last guy typically left over in the third round before you hit the quote-unquote running back dead zone, whereas Breece Hall has a history of catching the ball. So he's someone that should be able to separate. But again, maybe in playing under first-time offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrand, obviously coming over from Detroit with Aaron Glenn, maybe we should be more contentious or scared about the volatility of Breece Hall. But curious to get your thoughts on their play calling and their offense this year, Mike.
Yeah, so definitely the Detroit background makes you feel a little bit good just because we saw what Ben Johnson was able to do. Dan Campbell, that offense was fantastic, and I think we can agree played above their skills. You know, Jared Goff had never played at that level with Sean McVay, who we all view as a genius, and yet they were able to maximize the talent there in Detroit and score at an unbelievable level. I mean, it's going to be hard for them to match like 4 touchdowns a game. That's something that you don't see peak Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Patrick Mahomes offenses do, Drew Brees, you name it. It's just so hard to do. So that gives you some excitement, but, you know, sometimes it's about personnel, you know. Justin Fields, we know, is going to run the football a lot. He's not a guy, he's been around a while. We know that he's not going to put up big passing numbers, and I think that's the larger indicator of what to expect from this offense this season. So, yeah, I mean, I've expressed this on social media. I'm worried about the ceiling and, frankly, maybe the consistency of guys like Garrett Wilson, perhaps Mason Taylor, if you like him as a sleeper, the rookie tight end. Worried about him as well. Fortunately, we don't have to worry about many other guys in the pass catcher positions. Breece Hall might be okay. You know, Justin Fields perhaps going to open up some rushing lanes just because of what he's able to do in the running game. I expect him to certainly be a run-first offense. So I think Fields has plenty of fantasy value, obviously. I'm not really in on Garrett Wilson. I haven't drafted him much because I'm worried about what he's going to be able to do in a low-volume pass offense. And then Breece Hall, again, I'm a little lower on him, too, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that it has not been a secret that they want to use multiple backs. Now, I do still think Breece will be the primary guy there, but if they really are going to move, Braylon Allen into somewhat of a 10 to 12 touch role, maybe he sees him as like in that a lesser David Montgomery role, it's going to limit Hall's ceiling, and so I haven't found myself drafting him very often. So it's pretty much Fields or bust for me for this Jets offense.
What's interesting to me about that, Mike, is I know, as you referenced, the new OC came over from Detroit, but Fields is just such a different quarterback that,
right.
You wonder how much of the Ben Johnson stuff he can use, because Jared Goff and Justin Fields, they might be polar opposites, right? Like, Goff is such a good processor, so accurate, gets the ball out in rhythm on time. Fields is more extending plays. Goff is not mobile at all. Fields is more. So you have a first-time play caller who's doing it with a totally different quarterback. I don't know. I color me skeptical on the Jets, which it sounds like you are as well.
Yeah, agreed 100%. I think that's something I learned. I used to do a big article every year looking at play callers and the impact, and I probably leaned too heavy on it back then because you quickly learn that personnel matters substantially more. These guys have to adjust to the players. It's just it's impossible not to. It's going to affect scoring. It's going to affect play calling, and that's what you learn pretty quickly when you do this thing. So you can learn some trends. There's ways to adjust. We know Sean Payton, for example, likes running backs in the passing game, things like that. So you can pick things apart, but I think this is a good example. Like you said, polar opposites at quarterback, that matters a lot. And, I'm sure we're going to get in, or perhaps we're going to get into the Saints as well. Same thing. Kellen Moore going from one of the best group of weapons in the game, elite offensive line, skill guys, going all the way to maybe the shakiest quarterback situation we've seen going into a season in years in the NFL. That's a big difference. And so you can't just expect him to do the same things and have the same success that he had in Philly, in New Orleans. So all those things are important.
How are you projecting the Saints, if you want to just ease right into that? Because Tyler Shuck 26th in September, second worst completion rate under pressure in this class. Having said that, Kellen Moore has already mentioned that it's an open competition, and the competition he's supposedly against is the player in Spencer Rattler who was already benched last year for Jake Haener. So I believe we're getting a full season of Tyler Shough. Again, someone we really don't know about. Despite that age, did not have the same experience in pass attempts as Bo Nix did coming out as an older prospect. And when you look at the Saints, honestly, the way their roster's built, it's so fragile that it does seem like they are a team that could perhaps finish with the league's worst record when you're betting on DraftKings.
Yeah, no doubt. The one word is scared. I'm scared of all these guys. This could be a disaster. And sometimes when we think things are going to be an unmitigated disaster, thinking like the Rams defense a couple years ago and everyone left and they ended up being okay, maybe that's possible. Maybe Shough is just good enough to keep the ball moving. And Alvin Kamara, who's 30, by the way, keep that in mind. Tons of volume for him, and now he's 30 years old. Chris Olave with the injury issues. Rashid Shaheed hasn't really established himself as an every down player that can make it through a full season as a fantasy starter. Missed most of last season as well. Taysom Hill probably not playing this season. The offensive line not in great shape. There's a lot of red flags for this Saints offense, and I think it might be a disaster. So for the most part, I've tried to avoid all of these guys. I know Kamara is not as expensive as in years past, but he is about as expensive as he was last year. I took him quite often in the fourth round, and I like that value. That's about where he's going now, too. So I don't feel good about that. Olave, I have a little bit of him in some drafts, but, he's coming, again, obviously he's coming at the cheapest he's been since he's been in the league. But you just think about offenses like this. Are they going to score like one touchdown a game? How is he going to score more than 4 or 5 touchdowns in that scenario? I mean, there is a very low floor for pretty much all of these guys. And if I can avoid them all, I'm going to do it.
I've been taking them in DraftKings Best Ball, and that's solely a strategy position just because in 3 QB builds, when you're padding for potential injuries, protecting yourself from that much risk in June drafts, Tyler Shough is always left over, and you can late stack him with a couple of guys, including Jawan Johnson, who sneakily got 20 plus million guaranteed on the open market, now playing under a previous tight ends coach who also highlighted Dallas Goedert just last year, and Kellen Moore. So that's really the only reason I've been drafting him. I do think, to your point, it's an entirely different conversation when it comes to season-long leagues. Ross, go ahead.
Don't go anywhere. Got to pay some bills real quick. I love Labatt. I love all of you. I love what feels like free merch. We're combining all of that. We're combining all of that at once. Buy beer, get gear. At a minimum, please go to rewards.labattusa.com to see their insane merch because it's incredible. I told you a million times, I already got the mini fridge, and I just recently got the cooler backpack, which is awesome. Rewards.labattusa.com. All right, Mike, you mentioned Kellen Moore, came from the Eagles, where they have a loaded roster. That means the Eagles have a new play caller. Again, Kevin Patullo, it's another internal promotion. They've done this 3 times in recent years after Super Bowl appearances. It really hasn't gone that great. Quite frankly, the last 2 times they did it, 2018, I think it was Mike Groh maybe after Frank Reich left, and then a couple years ago when Steichen left, they went with Brian Johnson. Does that concern you for the Eagles? Obviously, they have a lot of really good players, but they have a new play caller and a first-timer in Kevin Patullo.
Honestly, not really. I think they've kind of established this offense, and all the talent's back. The offensive line remains elite. They have all this. They brought Dallas Goedert back, so they have all the skill guys. Jalen Hurts is still going to use, the guys. The brotherly shove is still alive and well, at least for 1 more year. So we still have that in our back pocket. So thinking about it from a fantasy perspective, not really worried about it. All those skill guys are there. Barkley, Brown, Devonta Smith. It's pretty much the same group that won the Super Bowl last season and scored at a high level. So to be perfectly honest, I'm not worried at all. I didn't really move the needle for that move. I think it's it's Sirianni, it's Hurts, it's the skill guys. It's just hard to fail when you're healthy and have that level of talent on the field.
Another team with elite playmakers that, unlike the Eagles, I do personally worry about, and that's why I want to hear your thoughts on it, is the Detroit Lions this year. When looking at players to potentially fade or be overweight on even in fantasy, I usually start with the guys who everything went right for. The dominoes fell perfect for them, and yet they didn't separate at their position. And that's the argument I'm making for Jared Goff this year and having career highs in completion rate, touchdown rate, raw touchdowns at 37 and yards per attempt, and yet still only the QB9 in points per game. And now we have this trending, a negative trend going on for Detroit, and that 55-year-old John Morton, now their OC, first time calling plays since 2017 with the Jets, not to mention their starting center, Frank Ragnow, retiring as well, Amon-Ra St. Brown coming off a cleanup surgery on his knee. So your thoughts on the Lions this year under Morton and just the environment that Ben Johnson leaves left over for them?
Yeah, and I think it starts with the O-line. The whole interior offensive line may be different. I mean, I remember right when the season ended, Lions fans were like, "We need to replace our left guard. Graham Glasgow needs to go. He struggled. That's the big hole. We gotta move on from him. He might be their starting center now. They might move him over and start him there, and then you're filling the blanks at guard with someone off the bench, and then potentially a second round rookie. So that makes me a little bit more hesitant about the run game. How dominant are they going to be run blocking? That's been huge for, I think, actually the passing game as well. It's helped Jared Goff really maximize himself in recent years. So that's big. I mean, that is the biggest weakness on an otherwise very good roster, interior of that offensive line. So no doubt about that. I mean, look, from a fantasy perspective, absolutely hate Jared Goff. I'm with you 100%. He's one of the easiest fades, I think, in this game. On top of everything you just laid out, I alluded to this earlier. They scored 4.0 touchdowns per game last season on offense. Again, that is Brady, Mahomes, Manning, they did that like one time. I mean, that's such a hard line to get to. And they're not going to repeat that. They're probably going to score closer to 3 touchdowns per game. That's about, 17 touchdowns over a full season. That is substantial. And it makes me kind of hesitant on some of these guys. They did move Jahmyr Gibbs down like a slot. I still, he's Jahmyr Gibbs. He's young. He's one of the few running backs we feel really great about. Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to get his. Sam Laporte actually was really good in the second half last season, so I think where he's going is perfectly fine, much lower than last season. But when you can't run at all as a quarterback and you need those elite passing numbers just to hang on to fantasy relevance, like you said, just to be a fringe QB1, that's always a bad sign. You got to be out on those guys. It's just not repeatable.
Mike, let's talk about Cowboys because they have a new head coach in Brian Schottenheimer. McCarthy no longer calling the plays. And I know from having, played for Brian's dad, Marty, in Washington in 2001, his background, and we remember this from when he was with the Jets, he wants to run the football. When he had Sanchez, those Rex Ryan couple years, he wants to run the football, and yet the Cowboys – I don't really even know who their running back is. It's any of these nondescript. Javonte Williams, maybe he's healthy after 3 years of not looking the guy like he looked as a rookie. What are you feeling? How are you thinking about the Cowboys right now? Because even though I think Schottenheimer wants them to be run-based, they go out and they trade for George Pickens. Now they have CeeDee Lamb and Pickens.
Yeah, you know what? Something I've done for a long time is look at game script adjusted play calling to understand, okay, let's forget about what the scoreboard says and just focus on, what their play calling is throughout games for these play callers. It's, I think, very important to project out offenses. Brian Schottenheimer's last, we'll say, 3 full seasons, really could go 4 as a play caller, are either balanced or lean toward the pass. So he hasn't been run heavy for quite a while. So I think, I'm projecting him out as a balanced offense leaning a little toward the pass. And the reason, that I'm leaning a little toward the pass is because of exactly what you just said. They don't have a reliable, established running back. It's not a position that they have prioritized the last couple of years, but they do have what should be an impact passing game. So I'm with you. I'm not worried about them being run heavy. I don't think it's really logical from a standpoint of wanting to win games. I mean, you're going to lean on Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders to beat the Eagles and the Commanders. I just don't think that's going to happen.
The talent is going to naturally, and this is the way I've been framing it all off season, win out, and the Cowboys will have to pass the ball just based on their personnel. Also, everyone forgets that the last time Schottenheimer called plays, he was the one that allowed Russ to cook. And only in the last month of the season, when Russ was getting so banged up because their offensive line just couldn't hold it together, that's when Pete Carroll stripped the play calling and said, okay, like this guy is lingering towards not playing. He's so banged up. We have to instead run the ball just to help him out. He's bruised and battered every single week. But Schottenheimer does want to pass it. I highly question the X's and O's portion of the game and in-game coaching Brian Schottenheimer brings to the table. But Dak, CeeDee Lamb, George Pickens even, they're so good. Jake Ferguson is a late-round tight end that I do naturally think everyone is underrating Dallas's passing offense this year for fantasy drafts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, especially if they're struggling. I mean, again, tough schedule in that division. They have to keep up with the Eagles. They have to keep up with Washington. And I think the Giants have a good defense. I think they're going to be at least competent this year with a competent quarterback and good defense. So, no doubt, they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. And I think that's why we all feel pretty good about CeeDee Lamb. And even George Pickens is potentially a wide receiver 3, even with Lamb having a big season. And Jake Ferguson, frankly, always underrated. Probably going to finish tight end 9 or 8 or something like always, but we'll get him super cheap late in drafts.
And Jake Ferguson, Ross, that is Evan Silva's favorite tight end sleeper that you can get late in season-long drafts this year.
Love it. It's funny because a lot of times these new guys, these first-time guys, Mike, I can ask you about them, but there's not going to be much you really know. You're kind of guessing. Whereas in New England, Josh McDaniels, can you refresh our memory on McDaniels? Because he's got a lengthy track record that we should be able to tap into to try to get some clues on the Patriots offense this year.
Yeah, what's this, like his 6th time through New England or something? He just leaves, comes back, leaves, comes back, leaves and comes back. Yeah, you know what? We have a long track record of him calling plays, so we can look at the data there. But frankly, it looks pretty much like league average trends for the most part. Like some years he's up with tight ends. Obviously, he had some fantastic tight ends during his times in New England. Sometimes they're low though, so he's kind of been all over the place and very much dependent on the personnel around him for sure. I think that one of the things that affected my my projections for New England was actually the history of Mike Vrabel. And, when he was in Tennessee, everything was run heavy. So I think that's something that he's going to, obviously he's in charge. He's the boss. He's going to talk to Josh, and I'm sure they're going to lean on the running game. They drafted a running back in the 2nd round. They have a good young quarterback there, but they don't really have a great group of skill guys right now. Maybe if Stephon Diggs gets healthy, but we'll see how that looks, and Kyle Williams obviously pans out. But I do think they're going to lean toward the run. And that's something that makes me a little bit less interested in Drake May as a sleeper. I just don't know if the ceiling is what we really want it to be. I don't think they're going to come out and he's going to throw 35 passing touchdowns. I think it's going to be a balanced, conservative offense. And he can run a little bit, which helps him. But I do think the scheme here is going to limit that passing game a bit.
I mentioned Detroit as one I'm worried about. Another one that I want to check your temperature on is the Buccaneers, because similar to Jared Goff, we do have Baker Mayfield coming off of career highs and passing yards, touchdown passes, completion percentage. But maybe the glass half full view is that also passing game coordinator Josh Grizzard, who was promoted to offensive coordinator, this is finally the first time since 2018 that at least Baker Mayfield has had someone who he's familiar with. Not the same play caller, of course, as Liam Cohen moves on to Jacksonville, but just promoted from the same system. And so how are you viewing Baker Mayfield, who, like Goff, doesn't really add much rushing juice to fantasy points, and the passing game there, since they are all have inflated ADPs for home leagues?
Yeah, so as for Baker Mayfield, you're right. He does a little bit of rushing, but not enough to keep him in that elite conversation. If you look at fantasy points per game last year for the top quarterbacks, he was right in the mix. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, McDaniels. And then you also had Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield right in that conversation. But whereas the way I'm drafting, I feel like there's a big 4. I'm not actually including Burrow. It's the 4 running quarterbacks. And the reason why the other 2 fall out is obviously rushing. But you look at Baker Mayfield, and again, you can include Joe Burrow here too as well. It's the same kind of thing. They needed 40-plus passing touchdowns last year to be in that conversation, to even hang with those guys who all put up big rushing numbers. Do you realize that only 7 quarterbacks in NFL history have had 40-plus passing touchdowns more than once? So can they do that? I mean, can Joe Burrow do that, let alone Baker Mayfield, get to that number again? And they need that. Because they don't run that much, they have to get there to be in that same conversation. So, they're not super expensive in fantasy. Certainly Baker Mayfield isn't. I'm fine with him as a mid to back end quarterback one, but I agree with you. He's not going to hang with those guys this season. He's going to fall off. The play caller change is one thing, but history is another thing. What I do like about him, though, is they've done a great job just building up the skill guys around him. Chris Godwin, we don't know if he's going to play early in the season, but if he doesn't, they have an arsenal of players around him. He's going to be in good shape. So, that's enough for him to be QB1 in fantasy, but I'm with you. I think he falls off a bit from last year.
Check him out on social media. He's fantastic. At Mike Clay NFL. Obviously, hopefully you already follow John at Not J Daigle. I'm at Ross Tucker NFL. Other than that, I'm stuffed. We're finished.
Thanks for tuning in to Fantasy Feast. Make sure to also check out the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Even Money, and College Draft, all on the DraftKings Network, YouTube, or subscribe to the podcasts on your favorite platform.